if we look at, so Bnei Noach, the concept comes from the Torah itself. As I said at the beginning, all of the humanity descend from Noah.
Mm-hmm.
The rabbis understand from Bereshit chapter 9, when Noah comes out of the ark, the God makes a covenant with humanity, an eternal covenant. It says Berit Olam.
Mm-hmm.
So with all of humanity by way of Noah.
So Brit Olam, normally it's translated, I guess, in our Bible as a covenant with the world. But I guess Olam can also mean eternal.
Eternal.
So it's an eternal covenant.
That's right. It's an eternal covenant.
Mm-hmm.
And a way to remember this eternal covenant is the rainbow, the Kashrut.
Mm-hmm.
So this reminds us of this covenant, which is eternal. So we have two covenants that are not that are working together, which are not contradicting each other. We have the covenant with Noah and all of humanity, and then we have the covenant at Sinai with the nation of Israel and all those who were there at that moment, and all those who will add themselves to this nation by Giyur or conversion.
So the covenant at Sinai did not supersede the covenant with Noah.
No,
still in effect.
Yes,
right.
Definitely. In fact, if we look through the Tanakh, we will find various Bnei Noach who are assisting or who are interacting with the Israelites. For example, we look at Nebuchadnezzar, who is the king of Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
So the scripture says in Sefer Daniel that he boasted and he was so full of himself, and the Eternal One, blessed be He, humbled him for a period of 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until he recognized that the King of Heaven is the truthful King, that he was healed of his sickness, his mental sickness. So we will ask ourselves, how did this happen and why did it happen? So Nebuchadnezzar, being a non-Jew or non-Israelite, was under the covenant of the Bnei Noach.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first precepts of the Bnei Noach is to worship one God. And many of these emperors and kings and these nations of this time period, they believed themselves to be God on earth, or the embodiment of divinity. So this will be a contradiction or violation of that first principle.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see various cases of Bnei Noach. We see also the captain of Nebuchadnezzar's army, Nebuzaradan, who helped the prophet Yirmiyahu come out of the pit.
Mm-hmm.
And many other cases we will find throughout the Tanakh of non-Jewish people who are keeping their covenant. We can even see in Sefer Bereshit where Yosef, the son of Yaakov or Israel, when he goes to Mitzrayim and Potiphar's wife tries to take him,
Mm-hmm.
Yosef says he ran away because he didn't want to violate the principles that were given to him. So we ask ourselves, what principle is this? Where did he learn that it was wrong to commit adultery,
Mm-hmm.
to take the wife of someone else? He learned it from the oral traditions that were handed down to him. He was not a Jew, because the concept of Jew comes after Sinai. So he was a Ben Noach. He had the obligation to protect this mitzvah. Where do we learn of this mitzvah? We go back to chapter 2 of Bereshit, where it says, a man shall leave his father and his mother, and he shall cleave to his wife. So the rabbis learned his wife and not another man's wife.
Mm-hmm.
So from here we learn that there is a concept of an oral tradition which is passed down from Adam to Noah, and then with Noah a seventh precept was given, which was not to eat a limb from a live animal. And then these 7 are passed down to the Hebrews and everyone who is descending from all these people, which probably today are found in Africa or in other Middle Eastern traditions.
Yeah, could you say to people who might feel like sort of second class
Okay.
because they would want to?
That's a very good question because our rabbis talk about this concept that a ben Noach or bat Noach that keeps those universal principles and lives a pious lifestyle can reach the same level of holiness as the Kohen Hagadol of Israel, and can even reach Nebuah, prophecy. So there is no issue here of who's better or who's worse. The only difference is who has more obligations. So the Jewish people have more obligations than the Bnei Noach. But in terms of holiness and prophecy, there is no difference.
And so the concepts of, for example, teshuvah, return from your wrongdoings. Is there any difference between Jews and Bnei Noach in that regard?
Okay, so yeah, there is a difference. If we look at the entire system of the offerings and sacrifices in the Torah, they are referring to they are being applied, or they apply to the Jewish people. We have 5 different types of korbanot offerings. Some of them are to give thanks. Others are for when one commits an error, which in Hebrew is het. We have also the word awon, and we have pesha. So these concepts of het, awon, and pesha don't apply necessarily to the non-Jewish world, because het requires knowledge, or necessitates knowledge of the Torah, and when someone makes a mistake through ignorance or by involuntary transgression or violation of this precept of the Torah, this is considered het. Therefore, this person needs to take an offering in the form of korban hatta to the temple. This doesn't apply to the Bnei Noach. The only offerings that the Bnei Noach had were korban olah, which is if we look at the Torah, the first person that we see that does korban olah is Noah when he comes out of the ark. And this korban olah is when the animal is consumed completely on the altar in the fire. We see the same exact practice with Abraham, our patriarch, with his son Yitzhak and his grandson Yaakov. And this practice is carried on amongst all the nations that are descending from the Hebrews. And Korban Olah is the only one that the Bnei Noach are doing, but it's not for sin.
So there's no sin offering for Bnei Noach?
There's no sin offering for Bnei Noach.
And so how would they attain forgiveness without a sin offering? How does that work for Bnei Noach?
Very good question. So the forgiveness works in the same way as it works for the Jewish people, which is teshubah and vidui, confession. So for the Ben Noach, there are 7 obligations, 7 principles, which have their legal ramifications depending on the dinim of the country where they live in. So we have a law. When the law has been violated, the Ben Noach or Bat Noach has the obligation of amending, correcting that wrong, of that transgression of that civil law, then confessing this to God directly without a need of any priest or anyone, and then making a change. And this is teshubah for a Ben Noach. For the Jewish people, there's a system in the time of the temple with when the person made the mistake involuntarily or by way of ignorance, the person took a korban hatat. But if the person made a sin, if a Jew made a sin voluntarily, there was no offering for that. So how did this person attain a atonement? The person had to do teshubah and confess the same way, and learn and study the Torah and mitzvot to not do it again. So in essence, the Ben Noach and the Jew have the same exact system or way of doing teshubah.
So in case of the Jew, there's only a very small category of sins for which he can bring a sin offering.
Exactly.
Right.
Which is for het. So I would translate this word roughly as a violation or an error, a mistake. And when we translate it to English or other languages, we create these problems because all of these words are translated as sin.
Yeah, with the heavy connotation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are 3 categories and levels of sin, so to speak, in Hebrew. If we go back to the history, we go back to the time of Rabban Hillel and Rabbi Shammai, we will see that the Pharisaical tradition was very pro-missionary. If we look at the writings of Josephus, we learn that the house of Hillel sent many missionaries to the nations to teach them the 7 laws of Noah. The house of Shammai criticized that, and they said, no, the nations don't need to learn the 7 laws. They need to convert. If they don't convert to Judaism, they don't have halak l'olam haba. They don't have a portion in the world to come. In the Jewish tradition, all the halachah follows Bet Hillel, follows Hillel. So according to the tradition of Hillel, the nations, the non-Jews, have a portion for the world to come in keeping the 7 laws. So this is the vision that was handed down to all of the Pharisaical teachers from the house of Hillel. If we go to the writings of the Christians, to the writings of Paul, this is his modus operandi. He is following the house of Hillel because according to their texts, the Christian scriptures, it says that he learned by the hand of Gamaliel. Gamaliel was a descendant of Hillel. So this will help us to understand why Paul is going amongst the nations, teaching them not to do the Jewish things, but to follow the 7 laws of Noah. And that was the ruling that the Christian community, the early Christian community, chose to follow. In Jerusalem, they made a ruling for their communities to keep the 7 laws, and those 4 things that they mentioned therein are directly connected to the 7 laws of Noah. And this is how Christianity is beginning in the Greco-Roman world as a Bnei Noach movement. Josephus states that in each of the communities throughout the Greek world, or the Romaniot communities, there were many God-fearers. Who were these God-fearers? The God-fearers were not Jews. They were non-Jews who attended the synagogue services, and they learned their obligations as Bnei Noach without becoming Jews. What happens is that once Christianity becomes a political power in the world, Jews are then prohibited from converting people. And then 200 years later, Islam did the same thing. So Jews, for a long time, did not have the ability to convert or to take new people into the nation. And there were exceptions to the rule every time. But for a long time, for over 1,000 years, the Jewish people became very weary of taking converts. So today, if we look at where the Jewish people are compared to the last 1,000 years of our history, we will see that we have more freedoms than before. So we don't have the yoke of the Greco-Roman world or even the Islamic world to tell us otherwise. We can now fulfill our mission as Jews, which takes us back to Parashat Yitro. You shall be a light to the nations, a priest, a kingdom of priests. You cannot be a priest without having people to come.
Right.
So if the nation of Israel is a kingdom of priests, then where are the people to bring the offerings?